I think that we'll get started. Hello and welcome. My name is Janelle Fosler, and I'm the Fellowships and Grants Coordinator at the International Institute. I'm really excited to share more about the international research and internship funding that we have available through the International Institute in Rackham with you all today. Before we begin, I wanted to make a quick announcement. We will be recording this session, so you will have your cameras off and be muted for the duration of the presentation, but afterwards we will have a Q&A session. Throughout the presentation, you're welcome to add any questions that you have to the chat, or you can also just jot them down for when we're done. Claire Evatt is our administrative coordinator for our department, and she's also joining us. She'll be monitoring the chat, and she'll help facilitate the Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, you can drop them in specifically as we go through the presentation. So today we'll be discussing the funding opportunities that are offered through the International Institute, which has 17 centers, and also some opportunities through Rackham Graduate School. These opportunities typically fund about $600,000 per year to University of Michigan Ann Arbor students for international internships and research. The purpose of these awards are to promote global understanding and build connections across the world. The International Institute, like I said before, is made up of 16 centers focused on different world regions and themes. The Fellowships and Grants team is located within the International Institute, and you'll see some of our amazing advisors here. Our Fellowships and Grants team is a great resource for not only the opportunities we'll talk about today, but also a lot of prestigious and national fellowships and opportunities that are available, such as Fulbright the Foreign Language and Area Studies Fellowships, or FLAS, and also Critical Language Scholarships. So definitely connect with us to learn more about all of these amazing opportunities that are available. So the Global Research and Internship Opportunities Common Application is one of the opportunities I'll be sharing more about today. For everybody that's applying for a regional award, basically you should always apply for this because this is open to basically everyone that's doing an internship or research. There's opportunities within this common application that are for everybody. It includes the Rackham International Research Award, or RIRA, the Global Individual Grant, or GIG, and then also the YOLIS Graduate Fund for research on humanitarianism. The deadline for these applications are different, and so it's important to remember this one will be due on February 15th, and we'll be talking about all of these a lot more throughout this presentation. The other category of award we'll be talking about today is the region-specific opportunities. And so these applications are all separate, and there'll be links to all of them as we go through the presentation. Claire put the presentation into the chat, and we'll be sharing this as well. So if you are doing one of our global opportunities or applying for the previous award I talked about, if you're going to Africa, Japan, Korea, China, Thailand, anywhere in Europe or Eurasia, Latin American and the Caribbean, or Middle East and North Africa. So again, this is including a lot of different world regions. There's also additional opportunities. And so we always recommend applying for both or anything that you're eligible for. As far as eligibility for these awards, the most important thing, and what I say at the bottom, is to be sure to visit the individual award sites because there are some small differences related to all the awards, specifically around the project window and length requirements that you have to be in the project location destination. But for all of these awards, you have to be a U of Ann Arbor student. They are open to anyone regardless of citizenship. So the international students are eligible for all of these awards. You do have to return to campus for at least one semester after the end of your project. And so this wouldn't be for someone that's graduating, for instance, this semester. In most cases, projects have to take place outside of the US or US territories. However, if there's a country that you can't travel to at this time, like Russia or somewhere like that, then you can put in, like they will consider like different options for that, such as like a virtual internship. And so it's definitely something you can check in with us on a case by case basis. There are some travel destination considerations. Undergraduate students can't go to a country that has a travel restriction. So definitely make sure that you click the link and review the country that you're going to. For undergraduate students, you can go to a warning destination, and grad students can go to either, but it does require an approved health and safety plan before departure. And like I said, you'll just want to check the individual awards for other requirements. So these awards are for research or internships. So as far as the types of research projects you can do, you can see you can do preliminary research as a PhD student, dissertation research as a PhD student. It's open for independent research projects for students at any academic level, and you can also join an existing research project. But again, you'll just want to check the eligibility criteria of the different awards in relation to that. Like it's usually okay. The one thing to point out is that joint applications are not accepted. So if you are doing a project with another U of M student, you would each have to put in your own application. In terms of IRB approval, you do not need IRB approval by the time you submit the application, but you do need it before you start the project if it's required. So do you need IRB approval? Basically, if you're doing any kind of research with human subjects, IRB through U of M would have to approve this. So there is a link to more information on IRB approval, but keep in mind it can take 4 to 8 weeks. And so while you don't have to have it before the application is due, you definitely want to start this process before you might find out about the award. Like that's typically in April, the first week of April. And so if you're planning to go within a timeline, like before June, you'll want to start this process early. Again, this is just if you're working with human subjects. So if you're gathering like qualitative data or quantitative data where you'll be interviewing or surveying people, you do need to get IRB approval or exemption. In terms of internships, we don't have formal internship opportunities. And so you do have to get your own internship. A lot of people ask like how you would go about this. And so the number one thing that we say is to make sure you network. You can connect with faculty in different departments and just ask if they have any connections related to your interest or your field. Our II centers, I mentioned we have 17 of them focused on different regional areas or like different regions or thematic areas. So we have like the Human Rights Center, for instance. You could check with them or other departments on campus. Any of your own personal connections that you may have in country is a good place to start. And you can also look for organizations you'd be interested in working with and send them an email. You can think about it as a brief cover letter, introducing yourself and just kind of letting them know that you're interested in an internship. And going from there, again, we're happy to schedule a time to talk with you more about this if you have questions or need some guidance. And then formal internship opportunities through U of M will also be considered. So if you're applying for a formal internship, you can still apply for this funding. You'll want to review the timelines and requirements for the awards. Typically, it's a month of doing an internship, but some of the awards do require you to have a 6-week internship, such as Europe and Eurasia. And we also get asked a lot if internships can be paid. They can, but you'll just have to put this in your project budget, and that will just be accounted for in the amount of award that you can receive. Uh, in terms of just making sure you get all the funding that you can, again, the global and region or the global opportunities, you can apply in conjunction with the regional ones. So you want to apply for any awards that you're eligible for, and you can also combine these with other awards that are on campus. And so these awards can be funded. We'll talk about the project budget a little bit later, but there's just some considerations with that. You just can't you can't be overfunded over the top of your budget. So in terms of the Global Research and Internship Opportunities Common application, there's just one application for all three of these awards, the RERA, GIG, and ULIS awards. Um, this has links that go directly to the award pages, but you can see this table includes the academic level. So for instance, the Global Individual Grant is open to all students. So it's kind of, like if you're not a graduate student where you can see that the Rackham in ULIS, you do have to be a graduate student in Rackham, whereas the Global Individual Grant is open to everyone. The Global Individual Grant is also for research and internships, but you can see that the rest of like the project length and windows are all the same for these awards. So you would just need to complete them between May 1st of this year and May 31st of next year and be in country for at least 30 days. This includes the average and the award amounts that you can receive up to, and basically for the YOLIS, it's basically anybody that's doing broadly defined humanitarianism work. And so that could be anything from like working with refugees to climate change. If you can make a case for why it should be considered humanitarianism, then we definitely recommend that you apply for that award as well. So this is all one application. And again, the deadline is February 15th. The region-specific opportunities, the deadline for this is March 1st, and you can see that we include the eligible regions or countries for this in the first column. The second column. The first column does have links to the award pages, and then you can go down and see the academic level, the type of projects, the length, the project window, and the award amounts for all of these as well. So opportunities in all of Africa and Armenia, China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Europe and Eurasia on this page. And we have another page of region-specific opportunities. So again, these are for Japan and Korea on the top. You'll see that some of them are for research and some are for internships, and that there's opportunities for both graduate and undergraduate students. The Latin American and Caribbean Studies grants at the bottom, you'll see that instead of countries, it focuses on language. And so for the Tinker Awards, they are focused on Spanish and Portuguese speaking countries in Latin America, whereas for the Caribbean, basically it's for like the priority is for the Caribbean in English, French, or Dutch speaking countries. And then on this last page, we have some additional opportunities in Thailand. We also have a new award for North Africa and Middle East. We should have more details on our website within the week, but you can see that we do now have funding for the Middle East and North Africa. I believe the awards are around $1,000, but again, we'll have more details coming soon on this one. So as far as the application, they typically all follow the same application. And so when you're applying to multiple awards, it's okay for there to be duplication between the awards. They'll all be reviewed by different faculties. So for instance, they'll all have a statement of purpose with the same requirements. We'll be talking about that in a moment, but you can include the same information for the global and the regional awards if you're applying for both. The deadlines, remember the different timelines we talked about. So for the Global Research and Internship Opportunity Common application, that's due on February 15th, whereas the region-specific opportunities are all due on March 1st. An important thing to remember is that the faculty recommendations are also due by the same deadline. So you'll want to make sure that whoever's doing your recommendation letter is aware of that. And I would also request that soon so that you're not rushing at the end to get that completed. So we'll go through what is included in the application. There is just a general application that'll ask, a lot of demographic information about you, what your project title is, things like that. So there's links to all the applications in this PowerPoint that was shared with you. They'll all include a statement of purpose. And so the format for that, make sure you stick with this, that it's single spaced and 12-point font. You can do up to 3 pages, and that will include everything, so citations or graphics as well. When you're approaching your statement of purpose, this is an area that we do see people sometimes not kind of hit all of these points that uh, you're basically being reviewed on, but you'll want to make sure that you talk about why you want to do your research or internship abroad instead of doing something in Ann Arbor. You'll want to talk about how the project will contribute to your academic and professional goals. I would say that second one is on the reviewer rubric, and sometimes people miss, actually spelling that out. So it doesn't have to be a lot of space, but I would definitely connect this to your academic and professional goals, like actually write it out. Um, it's good to address specific awards that you're applying to. So, for instance, if you're doing the Global Internship and Research Opportunity, if you're applying for YOLIS, for example, you would want to kind of talk about how your project is related to humanitarianism. You'll want to address any language skills that you have that would help you, or how you'll address language barriers. So, for instance, if you're interning at an organization and they primarily speak English, it's good to point that out, or just other ways that you'll kind of like work through those barriers. A big thing is making sure that your project is feasible, and especially thinking about timelines. So, if you're going to do research for a month and maybe it's research that you'll be continuing to work on, just making sure that you're really spelling out what you're going to do on that month, and making sure it's realistic. So it might be a very narrow in scope compared to, continued research you could be doing when you're coming back. And so that's a great thing to talk with a faculty advisor about as well. And then anything on your budget, like you don't have to walk through all the lines of your budget, but it's good to kind of include information. Let's say like you're asking to maybe like purchase certain equipment. It's good to include a justification for why you need that in this statement of purpose as well. For research applicants, again, you'll want to talk about your objectives and the design of the research project. And kind of importantly, you'll want to write broadly enough for a non-specialist to understand. Typically, the person that's reviewing your application will be in a similar department as yours, but not always. And so you'll just want to write kind of more broadly. And for internship applicants, it's good to include a description of both the host organization and your role during your internship as well. You'll need one recommendation letter. You'll want to follow the instructions in the application carefully to make sure that this is being sent out before you submit the application. So there is detailed instructions right in the application. We do ask for you, there's some confusion. We ask for you to list the name and email twice on the same page, and it's just related to the way our application collects information. So it is all the same person when you see that. So again, you'll see the recommender's name, last name, and email on the application page twice. And so you'll just want to, it's the same duplicate information. We get asked a lot, who should write your letter? Definitely somebody who's going to have wonderful things to say about you, but typically we recommend a U of M faculty member. It can be a graduate student instructor or even a staff advisor in certain circumstances. But again, someone that knows you well. I would say if you're doing research, someone that can speak to your research project and the feasibility and methodology. So that could be like whoever's advising you in your research, or just someone with familiarity. If you don't really have, like if you're an undergrad doing research, it's good to connect with a faculty member, GSI, and just kind of like share about your project if that's who's going to write your recommendation letter. In terms of, there's also a letter that should say letter of invitation or in-country resources, part of the application. So for internship applicants, this is where you can include a letter or any correspondence you've had with the host organization. It's recommended that it includes information about the work you'll be doing and any financial terms. If you're applying for an internal, like a U of M hosted internship that's abroad, it can also come from the internship coordinator at U of M. For research applicants, if you're joining a project already, you could get a letter from them, but you can also include information on just the in-country resources you plan to utilize. So if you know that you'll be going to certain archives, if you have certain connections or people that can help connect you into your research topic, it's good to kind of include that. So you don't have to write out an essay for this necessarily. It could just be like a list of how you're going to approach your research or your time in the country. And it just kind of assures faculty that you have a plan for when you're there. Um, if you don't have an internship finalized by the deadline of the application, that's also okay. You can upload a document that has a list of organizations that you're currently looking into getting an internship with. It can kind of also include some of those things I mentioned for the research application. So how you would approach this. For internship applications, you would have to have a formalized internship before you depart. But again, if you don't have it completely finalized by the application deadline, you should still try to apply. We ask for a resume or a CV to be uploaded. Your unofficial U of M transcripts, which are in Wolverine Access. There's instructions in the application on how to access those. We talked about IRB approval, but if you do need IRB approval, you can include either, like if you've worked through that process, you can include the letter from them stating that you are approved. If you haven't worked through the process yet, it's good to just upload a document and provide kind of an update on where you're at in that process. Like if you have started it, if you're planning to start it once you receive approval, and you'll have time to do that, just any information there. For the project budget, we have instructions that are linked in the application and also in this presentation. And so you'll see that basically, we have a project budget template that you need to use. We also have a sample budget. And so you'll want to work through this, but we do include all of the information needed. So the spreadsheet categories have information on how you would calculate or, determine those amounts. We also talk about eligible and ineligible expenses and how to estimate them, and then also how to download the information into the application. So you do need to use the template that we provide, the budget template, and the project budget should all be in US dollars. I would say the biggest tip for the budget is that you want to make sure that you build in some wiggle room and anticipate higher costs potentially for before you travel. And so maybe you have some options, different options on accommodations. For instance, I would include maybe like on the higher end of that range, just so you have some room. So maybe you have like a hostel fallback, but you also have another place. I would definitely think about your flights. Like the costs right now might be lower than they are when you receive the award in April, and then you're booking potentially for the summer. So I would definitely kind of build in some reasonable room. So you don't like for your accommodations, for instance, like I definitely don't recommend like a 5-star expensive hotel, but I think that you can have some different kind of fallback options if you don't receive the full amount of funding, but definitely build in some room in your budget because we can't fund over your budgeted amount. And so basically, whatever, your eligible expenses are kind of like the cap for the amount of funding that you can receive for even multiple awards. So this is a look at a sample budget. You'll see basically how we break this down. And so you would want to include a line for each country or location that you're visiting. This sample kind of shows different cities in Japan, but even if you're going to different countries, you'd want to make a line for each one. So you can see that we have like the airfare, the transportation, and ground transportation in a category. You'll see that for food, typically like on how to estimate expenses, you can look at like an average amount that's spent on food on a day and then multiply that by the number of days that you would be in each area. Everyone is required to get U of M travel insurance, and so the current rate is the 115 plus the $5 admin fee. So you would just multiply that in as shown here. You can include any immunizations, and then we have this other category where if you have visa, materials or equipment fees, or just miscellaneous, you can add those. You'll see that some categories say personal funds, so you can show how much you would be contributing to the budget. Like for instance, the camera lens, this person has $50 of personal funds and $250 coming from another funding source since this camera lens is an ineligible expense, but it does show the total kind of like budget that you need or what you're contributing. Other funding sources, this is where, like, if you already received other funding for this trip, then you can include that there. If you're applying to other funding sources, you wouldn't want to include that in these lines right now. You can note that in your, like, you can note that in your personal statement that if you get other funds, you would be using them towards this or towards the things in your personal fund. But the other funding source should just be funding that you already have for certain at this time. And in the project budget instructions, we include information about eligible and ineligible expenses. But if you have questions specifically about certain things, you can reach out and we can help you with that. So how the funding is determined, there is a review process. So all of the applications are reviewed by multiple faculty members, typically around 3. We assign reviewers based off of the region or country, and then also try to assign reviewers that are in the same or a similar academic field as you. The applications are scored in these 5 categories. So feasibility, basically like, is there sound methodology and is the plan reasonable for the amount of time that you will be there? Like, will you be able to work through that research or internship wise? The relevance, like how this is related to your academic field and future career goals. Your record of academic achievement, this isn't just about your GPA, but it does look at your transcript and also pulls from your personal statement, basically about how this, it's kind of similar to the relevance above, but basically like, do you have promise in like your career and how this will support that? The program budget is a consideration just if they feel your program budget is reasonable. And then there's also a score for the overall quality of the application proposal. The reviews are confidential, so they won't be shared with you later, but just to give you an idea, these are the main areas, the main categories on how your application is scored by faculty reviewers. As far as the timeline, again, the Global Research and Internship Opportunities is February 15th, whereas the region-specific opportunities are March 1st. The award determination letter should come out around the week of April 7th. And so before that, the application review is taking place, and we're just looking at all your different funding from the different applications and making sure that that doesn't go over your overall budget. Some other considerations for all of these awards to go abroad, you will need to get LSA international travel approval. And so that's mandatory before funding can be dispersed. We'll be sharing information about this when award letters are released, but essentially you will need to purchase U of M travel insurance from the group policy, provide emergency contact information, and register your travel. If you're going to a country with a warning or restriction, you'll also need to get a health or safety or submit a health and safety plan, and that can take 3 to 4 weeks if they have all the information needed on your first submission. So this is something that you can start earlier in the process if you're planning on going with or without the funding. And so There's a link here that takes you to that information. It's important to think about financial aid. So if you get financial aid and you don't have a lot of little or no unmet need, basically in your financial aid package, it's good to reach out to the Office of Financial Aid earlier. The earlier the better. So we have an email here and basically talk to them about any potential implications for receiving an award. And you can also do this after the awards go out and check back in with them based on the amount you receive. If there is an issue, you can reach out to us and we can talk to you about different ways that you can try to mitigate that. It could be enrolling in like a one credit course that the funding could help cover. So definitely reach out to us if this is an issue. And lastly, international students should know that this grant is subject to the mandatory income tax withholdings if your country doesn't have a tax treaty with the United States. And so that's also something you can reach out to financial aid about if you have any questions. As far as requirements for after the award, you do have to report any additional funding to us. So if you get funding after you accept our award, there'll be a process for you to let us know that. It could change your overall funding from us if you're overfunded for the project. So if it's going over your total budget. You can also submit a justification for how you're going to like change your research if you get more funding, like maybe you're going to stay longer or something along those lines. And so again, any additional funding has to be reported and we'll work with you to kind of how that'll be approached. You have to report any changes to the project. And so again, like after you accept the award, if your country changes, like where you're going changes, your internship site, anything related to your research changes, then you'll submit this award and we'll basically be able to provide approval. The big thing to think about is if you're applying for the region specific awards and you decide that you're not going to one of the countries that's covered in their area, that's the biggest reason that we see like funding not being like where we have to like rescind funding. But overall, we're typically able to work with you and make your changes work. And then all the different awards have different post-award requirements. And so everyone will have to include a brief report and you'll have the option to upload photos, but some of the different awards require attendance at events or a presentation or a paper, thank you letter for the donor. This is all included in the award web pages as you're looking through these. We do have advising open. You'll typically schedule a time with me, but if you're doing a regional opportunity in Asia, and is also a really great resource. I've included our website and our email here if you'd like to just contact us with questions. And just one more reminder on those deadlines, the Global Research and Internship Opportunities due February 15th, and the region ones are March 1st. Everyone should apply for the Global Research and Internship Opportunity, just because everyone will have some eligibility in that. And then if you're going to a country that we have awards for, it's highly recommended to apply for both. And that's the end of our presentation. Here you can find some more information on how to follow us at the II. But Claire, we can stop the recording and shift into Q&A.